Heading to go train. Got my range bag, got my gun bag. Now I got my safety equipment, medical gear. I'm ready to hit the range.
Hey folks, welcome back. I'm back after being gone for a couple hours doing some seminars, demo stage stuff, but I am pleased to be back here with co-host Matthew Merster, extraordinaire of all things awesome, related especially to the Concealed Carry podcast. And we're also very excited now to introduce to you Ron Aguiar with Oasis Safety, and he is the expert on all things church or house of worship, security-wise.
Correct.
And we're just thrilled to have you here. You're doing some seminars as well yourself?
Yeah, I've spoken this afternoon for a couple hours and tonight for another hour. The response has been really great.
Yeah.
We've had standing room only in the class, so people are really interested in this. It's too bad, but recently we've had some shootings, of course, here in Pittsburgh at the synagogue.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
And some other churches, most notably, of course, the Sutherland, Texas church where 26 were killed.
Yeah.
Some other churches recently. So it's just a hot topic right now, and people are interested to learn how to keep their houses of worship safe.
It's important and it's critical.
Right.
Now, Matthew and I are both church-going, guys. I actually lead a congregation in my local church as well, which, funny enough, I'm missing church on Sunday. That doesn't happen too often. So this is definitely at the forefront of my mind all the time, thinking about my congregation.
Right.
These are my brothers and sisters, and we don't want to see anything bad happen to us,
Correct.
obviously. But churches have unique security requirements, and of course, there's that in the big challenge. This is something we struggle with our own security team, is that balance between being a watchdog, essentially, being a security person,
Correct.
keeping an eye, making sure we keep the wolves out of our congregations, but balancing that with being welcoming, ministering, inviting, loving.
Right.
And I don't find I have too much of an issue with that, but I do think that there are certain people that kind of like not really sure how to not look at everybody like they're the next serial killer. Right. How do you think we balance that? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's a difficult situation because magnetometers are in some churches unbelievable, but they are. At Ground Zero, there's a couple churches with magnetometers, metal detectors. There's a couple churches around the country that have started in large cities to start wanting people. Some congregations of houses of worship, they're getting a little nervous, but most churches don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay to keep a welcoming, open church or house of worship. And the millennials of all people, my daughter and my sons are millennials, they'll tell you right up they'd like to see some form of security because they've got a little young child. They for the first time giving it to the children's area. We'd like to see some cameras. We'd like to see maybe a uniformed police officer walking around once in a while or somebody that's a denoted security.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay in this time of our life to say, you know what, we can have security in church and not be ashamed to do it. So I think that's okay. So when people ask, well, what's the first thing you would do? I said, if you can, hire an off-duty officer. Hire them as a contract employee. They're not an employee of the church. They're a contract employee. What makes it really unique is these officers are police officers 24/7.
Yeah.
They're covered and protected by their agency or law enforcement agency or police department or sheriff's department, both civilly and criminally. So when they respond, they're policemen.
Yeah,
Whether you have them paying them $30 an hour, whatever the case is, they're responding as a police officer and they're covered. So the liability of the church is reduced, and your insurance company will love that and maybe even reduce your premiums because you're creating a safer place. So I think that's where you start. Many churches that I keep talking to are 100 to 200 members. How do you do this? I say you got to start. You got to put somebody in charge. Meet with the local PD or sheriff's department, have them come in and do an assessment of your property and building, meet with your fire marshal, even EMS, bring them in. And you'd be surprised what you'll learn with those 3 visits.
Yeah.
And that will start you going and say, okay, we need this, this, and this. Not all police departments are equipped to really do a church assessment, but they're getting equipped. There's companies out there that are providing information now. USCCA has been active in doing that with their recent Proving Ground series, which I was a part of, and it's on the internet and it's free on YouTube right now. And those 4 videos really talk about active shooter in the church, how to prevent it, and if it does happen, what to do. I'm all about preventing it. I rather walk away after 10 years of doing something in the church and say, well, we never had any incident. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So, that's what you do. You start protecting. And something else that you don't forget, guys, are the children.
Right.
The first shootings and first house of worship, big shootings occurred in Fort Worth, Texas, at a youth rally in a church.
Right.
And, you think of Columbine High School, young people. And I think we really don't forget about them. So if you're providing security for this big church and the sanctuary and all this, don't forget about the youth and the children. Always take care of them with a security person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you mentioned something that was really interesting, and I never really, I've thought about it, but I never put it into words like this. So you saying this, you talked about being a fire marshal or a professional to do a site analysis, right?
Right.
And if you think about all the deaths of fires, right, long time ago, right, kids would die in a fire in a grade school, right?
Right.
Now we never ever hear of like deaths due to fire because we know XYZ, we have to have a certain amount of exits. We have to do this. We have to do that. The same type of analysis should be
Right.
done when you're building a church or a school.
Mm-hmm.
How do we have egress routes? How do
Right.
we control entry points to our buildings?
Correct.
We don't really think about that. We think about
Right.
it as, for fire control, but we can still do the same thing through design of the building or the foliage outside and things like that, directing people into certain areas. But I really think that's important because a lot of churches might they might have a controlled budget, right? And they
Right.
say, well, let's just get a bunch of people in the congregation who have concealed carry
Correct.
licenses and
Right.
they'll be our team.
Right.
But they're lacking that professional overview to say, this is a vulnerability.
Right.
You need to secure this door during,
Sure.
And so those are the types of things I think that you're bringing up that are really important.
Yeah, and I think security at a house of worship is layered. I think and the videos show this out. We talk about the layers of security getting all the way into the sanctuary. And the first layer is your parking lot. If you don't have anybody in the parking lot, put somebody with a vest on and a wand and greet people and park cars and say, hi, how are you doing? Oh, by the way, equip them with a radio so
Yeah.
they can call your security team.
Communications are important.
Incredible.
Essential.
And, small churches will say, well, I can't afford a $400 radio. Well, those family channel radios are like $20 a piece.
Yeah.
Just get on a channel that Joe's Concrete Company isn't on. But but have some communication so that if they see something, they say something. See something unusual or someone walking in. I understand from the ministry standpoint, people come to church because they're hurting.
Exactly.
And they may profile the same as a security risk.
That is true.
So you got to be really careful.
Yeah.
So what we would do is if we got a call like that, one of us in plain clothes would go and we'd introduce ourselves. Say, hey, my name's Ron. Welcome to the church. What's your name? And we get to know them a little bit in a minute or two, and we can find out whether or not they're a threat.
Just trying to become a friend with somebody, you minister.
Right.
You learn a lot about them.
Right.
And that's kind of how I've seen that as working as far as balancing that security aspect with the ministering side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Just being a friend.
Right.
Or at least trying to be.
Right.
And usually if there's something wrong, you're going to start picking up on that. Oh, there's something not quite right about this person. Then we can, take steps as far as how to mitigate that. But and I've tried to communicate to our own security people that this is a huge opportunity to greet somebody, to shake their hand, make that personal contact and connection, look them in the eye, smile, welcome. How are you?
Yeah. My security team, we were not a department, we were not an agency, we were a ministry.
Yeah.
So our security people always knew that we were a ministry. We prayed before we worked. Our first intent and purpose was to minister. If a security threat arose, of course they're going to respond. But it's always a ministry in the back of your mind. You say, I can remember we had an arrest at our church. Guy stood up and yelled and screamed in the congregation. And as the police officers put him in the car, I had to grab his head and put him in the car. He said, you're not allowed ever to come back here again. And he looked at me and he said, except to worship. And he put him in the car. So, it's just always in the back of my ministry. Now, when we layered security with the parking lot, the next layer is at the doors.
Yeah.
Your greeters, when they shake hands and say hello to people. Again, We all are in innate. I think God gives us an innate ability to say, I can discern something. So when you shake somebody's hand and the discernment is like, something's wrong here, I'm going to call security about this. Have them do what I just talked about, saying welcoming the person. And then you get into the sanctuary, and again, the ushers. As they're sitting people, as they're doing communion or offering all that, they'll see and notice things that they don't normally do. So that's where you train. You train those 3 levels of people.
Yep.
And of course, you want to train your staff. And we talked about the children again. You want to train the children, staff, and volunteers.
Yeah.
A lot of these shootings occur because of domestics, stem from domestics. I'm coming in to shoot and kill somebody in my family.
Right.
Or I've got a problem with some in-law or something. And it's tragic, but a lot of times the youth, volunteers, and staff will hear someone talking about that, some adult talking to another adult, or maybe even having an argument and saying, there's something wrong here. I need to tell security and a pastor about it, and maybe they need to talk to this person from a pastoral standpoint, but with a security mindset.
Yeah. I was thinking about children, right? And there's a whole nother strategy, that and considerations that must be present in that case, as far as, especially if your church has any sort of school involved with it as well. So what are your thoughts as far as protecting the children? What are some of the best practices right now today that you're seeing that's working well for churches?
There's a twofold thing. Number one, I think security is important, and we'll get to that. But the first thing is that we have to protect the innocent ones from sexual abuse. Sexual abuse prevention is so important. The CDC says this, that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys by the time they're 18 is sexual abuse. That's their numbers. I think it's worse than that. So I think we need to make a strong stance on what to do. There's some companies out there that have done excellent work in education, and I recommend houses of worship go through the internet, find the best ones that fit their profile, but train their staff and their volunteers on sexual abuse prevention. Get them certified. There's some companies that actually certify, do an hour-long video. It's not expensive. They certify them in training, and it just makes it top of mind so that the awareness level is lifted in those areas. The other thing to remember is, from a security standpoint, some people are against cameras in every location. If a church comes to me and says, Ron, where do we start with the cameras? Entry and exit points, a couple in the sanctuary, and then every classroom that the children are in, every classroom.
Yeah.
There's a number of lawsuits that have been filed because of some child sexual abuse. And you hear it, right? It's millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And some of that stem from the actual thing that there's no cameras in the classrooms. Now, I'm not saying that somebody needs to watch cameras all day on Sunday morning, but you have the cameras. That's a deterrent. If I'm if I'm a bad guy, I'm looking for cameras, and I see the cameras, I may not commit the crime there.
Right. Now, at least in our church, and I would think this is a kind of a best practice too. Thoughts on teachers that work with children, as far as we always make sure that there's 2.
Yep.
There's 2 present, right?
Have to be that.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
And adults.
Yeah.
You can't have a 10-year-old and an adult and call them as 2.
Yeah.
So you have somebody who's responsible, an adult. Some churches say 16 and above. It just depends. But I really think you got to have 2 people and adults. Never waver from that. It protects not only the children, but it protects the teacher.
Yes.
From any false accusation.
Absolutely.
Children are. When I grew up, there was no internet. Now, with a click of a mouse, you can find out a lot of things, good and bad. And these kids learn and watch. And they say, well, if I say something about Miss So-and-so, that'll get me out of class. Oh, gracious. You could ruin somebody's reputation.
Indeed.
Yeah, so just be careful.
Yeah, and all those things have to be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a tough situation sometimes, and we've seen some situations that could have been a lot worse than they probably were. Matthew, what are some of the things that, you as a church goer, what's on your mind as you enter a house of worship? And what do you think are maybe some common questions that other church goers such as yourself are maybe wondering about? Yeah,
and it's interesting you hit it on the head, because when we go to church, there's an area where we drop our children and they go to like a Sunday school, and then we go into the worship center, right? So it took me a while to accept that those kids were safe.
Yes.
I knew we had a security team. When I first started going there, I knew there was a security team. I picked them out. Like, I could see, their earpieces, and I saw, I could pick that out because I'm keened in on that.
You're a former cop, so you get it.
But so it took me a little while. But as I talked to them and knew them more and saw how they operated, I felt a little bit better.
Comfortable.
But I know a lot of people say, well, when we pray, we put our heads down, we close our eyes. That's when they're going to strike. And it's like, I get it. You sit positionally in the church as a person who carries and things like that. That's always on your mind. But I have to balance that with my faith of, like, I'm in a reverence point of I'm talking to God, and I close my eyes, and I'm in, I don't have my situational awareness at that point. It doesn't mean I can't click it on when I need to. And some people, I think they think it's like a binary, like, I can't close my eyes, I have to always, and so they feel vulnerable, and I get it. But I think, as we move, I always heard with the schools, we don't want to turn our schools and have cops around there, and it's going to scare the kids. Well, the cops won't scare the kids. What's going to scare the kids is a person going in there and shooting the place up.
Correct.
And so I think we're getting to the point where it's sort of acceptable at school. Still, do you see an issue with some churches, maybe certain denominational churches that say, no, we don't want any of that. That's so off-putting. We don't believe in violence. That type of thing where even in the presence of understanding that you are a very vulnerable point, that they just don't want it there.
Right, and it stems from God will protect us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
I keep hearing that. And I said, well, since you're talking to me and he's tapped me on the shoulder, I'm tapping you.
Yep.
Yeah. You're now responsible for the sheep in your church.
Yeah.
So, and I think the Lord has impressed upon many of us in this business, Christian and not Christian, is that, listen, when we're taking care of a house of worship, we're taking care of our people. So how do we protect our people? And I think he gives us that wisdom. He puts us in place to learn. I can't tell you how many times I have been walking in a church. One of the things I always ask, and I said, Lord, give me the eyes of an eagle, the heart of a lion, and the discernment of who knows what, but I need some. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen something before it happens. He shows it to you. He really, really does, if you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So, you walk over, you start talking to somebody, and I'll be darned, they're carrying a gun. Who are you? What's the gun all about? So I need to know that. But I think they need to understand that it's a ministry. At the same token, it's a responsibility.
Absolutely.
So, you talk about closing your eyes and bowing. But I can tell you, for 20 years when I was in service, my wife, after about the first month, stopped asking me, what did the preacher say? Because I wasn't paying attention. I was focused on our team and the scenarios that may play out. And you talked about the curly earpiece, which is really a great story. Because in large churches, I tell them to get radios, and they do. And I say, provide the ushers with radios too, the head ushers. Give them that curlicue thing. The bad guys think you got a bunch of police officers.
Exactly.
Bunch of security guys. But that's a great tool, and it's a great point. I mean, it's really hard, that ministry and security. It's always difficult to balance. But when you demonstrate the ministry part of it, we had a medical team, and doctors, nurses, and EMTs on it, and because it's a large church, we had a lot of medicals. And I can't tell you how many times in the ambulance, going to the hospital, getting ready to leave the church, or in the medical room, I'd open the door, and there'd be a doctor on his knees praying for the patient. And, if you got that mindset, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, we have here on the table your book, Keeping Your Church Safe. And tell us about the book here.
Yeah.
And, I understand that there's a second edition coming out soon.
Right. Wrote the book about 10 years ago, published it then. And I got involved. The reason I wrote the book was, as I was director of this large church, security director, I'd get calls from all over the country. Hey, tell me about children's ministry, or tell me your sports ministry, or tell me what you do for worship. After a while, I had written so many papers, I said, maybe I could put that together as a book. So it's written from an operational standpoint. As you all know, from a former police officer, I'm a former police officer. That's how I think. So instead of administratively, I wrote operational. It's very easy to read and point ABC. You want to do ABC. You want to do 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So that's how it's written. About 10 years ago. It's
Awesome.
now fairly outdated.
Yeah, things have unfortunately
it got
changed in
changed.
10 years.
So when I partnered with the USCCA to do the videos, they learned about this. And they said, hey, listen, can we come on board and publish it? So USCCA is publishing the second edition. It's going to be much bigger, much brighter, much better, and very up to date. It'll be out sometime this year, probably the end of the year, the end of summer, maybe in the fall. But they're working diligently on it, and they've got the manuscript, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
And if you're a USCCA member, you'll be notified.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, expect to see those emails, right?
Yeah.
So awesome, great resource. I'm excited to see the new edition, Ron. So be watching for that, folks. You know, it's amazing. The day has flown by so fast. We're right here at about 7 o'clock.
Sure.
Wasn't expecting it to sneak up on us like that. So it's about time to wrap it up.
Okay.
Ron, if you wanted to leave folks with some just last parting thoughts, anything related to what we've talked about, or even something unrelated,
Sure.
love to hear what you got to say.
Sure. Most important thing is to get started. Most churches are 100 to 350 members, most of the churches in America. They have maybe something. Maybe they're thinking about it. Get started. Call your local PD, your local sheriff's department. Can you come in and at least walk me through a process, walk through the building and tell me what you're thinking, and talk to a lot of people in the business, guys like me. Get on the internet and ask us questions. But get started, I think, is the most important thing. The other thing is, don't forget about the medical team, because you'll have more medicals than security incidents. So if you don't have one, get one in place and learn how to do that too.
Yeah, good thoughts. Well, folks, that's going to have to be a wrap for today. Thanks so much for joining us and watching us live here from the Concealed Carry Expo in Pittsburgh. Of course, brought to you by USCCA, and this broadcast booth made possible because of 511 Tactical and concealedcarry.com, of course, where we are fortunate to work.
Yep.
Guys, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, we will be getting started again with, or is it 9 a.m.?
9 a.m.
I think it's 9 a.m. Holy cow. It's going to sneak up on us before we know it. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more great coverage and interviews live here from the floor at the Concealed Carry Expo here at the USCCA in Pittsburgh. So, guys, thanks so much for being here with us today. We're going to bid Ron a goodbye.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been really great. And I mean, good content. I don't know that we've ever really talked really closely about church security here, especially we did the show last year, and I don't think that ever came up at all. So I'm really glad we had you on. Folks, have a great night. Be safe out there. We will see you back tomorrow morning. Make sure you get our notifications when we go live on Facebook and on YouTube, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Years in the military and over a decade in special forces, I've learned a thing or two. One of them being the importance of footwear. If your boots fail you, you might too. The people of 511, they don't just create their products in a vacuum. They get input from the guys and gals on the ground. Why are the ATAC 2.0 so good? Because the wizards at 511 took all the original features and added even more. Ones that, well, quite frankly, I love, so will you. Of all the features, the ones I love the most are these soles. Flexible, lightweight, you can still feel everything beneath your feet and you're still protected. Regardless of your mission, whether it's 16-hour patrol, fast roping out of a helicopter, or just hiking in the backcountry, you need quality footwear. Like these ATAC 2.0.